What's up, peeps? My name is Straight Shootin LJA, and welcome to the Straight Shootin Reviews. Now, one thing I wanted to review, and I've been meaning to review, is Sitting in Limbo, the Windrush Scandal drama shown on BBC. Now, this is for the Pre-Watershed version, and yeah, essentially, Sitting in Limbo, for me, showed how the goalposts were deliberately moved for the honest people of the Windrush generation, who had already had to fight for everything they had, by an ungrateful country wanting to kick them out. Literally, an ungrateful country. The Windrush generation helped rebuild the country after the Second World War and First World War, and it's one of them where years later now they're getting kicked, and now they were getting kicked out. So it's one of them where one of the early lines in it, actually, when Anthony, the character, was basically sitting with a solicitor, saying and kind of explaining his case and saying, what do I need to do to prove that I'm a British citizen and all that. The fact that this line came up, I can assure you there is no conspiracy here. When that was said to the main character, Anthony, it was a case of, I instantly thought to myself, when you have to say that and say it that explicitly, there clearly is a conspiracy, because otherwise you wouldn't have to say it. So it's one of them where it's like, I mean, the portrayal of the immigration officers, I think, was spot on. I mean, it really does show how we as black people are treated and looked down upon by the police, immigration, and other authority figures in society. And when we try and speak up, we just get labeled as aggressive or confrontational, or at the very least argumentative. Like when we try and speak up for something basic, like, no, this is not right, you just get labeled as the angry black woman or the angry black man and all that. And it's all this parasitic media perception as well has not helped with that. But it is one of them ones where, again in the indie drama as well, it's like, to take someone 166 miles away from their home to a detention center, which is basically a fancily named prison. I mean, you look at the way it was portrayed in Sitting in Limbo. A detention center is clearly a prison, because number one, you can't leave voluntarily. You ain't allowed to leave, and you're basically in cells. So that's a prison. You may want to call it a detention center, but that's a prison. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was a deliberate method to disorient and frighten people into not thinking straight. So, as I said, remember, a detention center is just basically a fancy name for a prison. And wanting to disorient people and frighten people into not thinking straight, it makes them make decisions that they wouldn't necessarily make if they were comfortable and if they were thinking straight. So it's one of them ones, if you throw someone off balance, they're not thinking with the clearest head. And that's forced. And that's clearly forced. But I also saw during the documentary as well, I mean, voluntary repatriation. I mean, that's just basically saying, here's a couple of grand, bugger off back to your home, in inverted commas, country. I mean, that's another slap in the face. Go back to a country where you barely have any connection. I mean, some people from the Windrush generation and some of the children of those who came over as well, it's a case of some of them won't have been back to Jamaica since they were like 4, and they're now in their 60s, nigh on 70s. I mean, there's no real connection there. I mean, with some of them, any family members that they did have over back in Jamaica, it'd be a case of they would have passed away. So there's literally no connection, and you've spent 50 plus years in this country. That's a long time. That's a hell of a long time. And voluntary repatriation, it's like, well, it's repatriation. It's like, here's a couple of grand, bugger off back to your own country. It's like, that's one of them was that. I mean, I said that is a legit slap in the face. And during the drama as well, where the offer of a paternity test to prove that Anthony was the offer of the paternity test to prove that Anthony was the father of his kids. I mean, come on. It's like the way it's like the language used, that your alleged children. Oh, the person you say was your teacher. It's like, that is utterly patronizing language. And I'm gonna come back to that in a bit as well. But I mean, it's a case of the acting was actually tremendous when the paternity test thing was even brought. Oh, would you be up for taking a paternity test? The look that Anthony gave the supervisor was tremendous acting, because you could see the level of disrespect that he felt as a man, as a person. It was like, yeah, that's spot on, and I think they got the casting spot on, but I'll come back to that later. But it is one of them ones where you can see that Anthony Bryan, the character in it, he wasn't the same man when he came back from the detention center as when he left, because getting treated like a criminal, it's not a nice experience. It really isn't, especially when, number one, you haven't done anything, and number two, you haven't done anything. So instead of the burden being on the accuser to prove that you've done something, the burden is on you as the innocent party to prove that you haven't done anything, which is completely backwards. And that was the problem with the Windrush Scandal, is that people who were invited over to this country, and even provided with transport. It's one of them where it's like, come over. We need you to help rebuild the country. Yeah, we'll, like, as long as you're willing to work, we will give you everything. So okay, cool. We're more than happy to work. More than happy to work our fingers to the bone. I remember it wasn't an easy transition either. There were a lot of English people here, English people who didn't want those from the Windrush generation here. So it wasn't as if it was all sunshine, lollipops, and it was easy. It wasn't. But getting treated like a criminal is not a nice experience. I mean, I've been stop and searched before. See, twice. And it's one of them ones, it's all, oh, you fit a description. You fit a description for a moped that was stolen. I had that right outside my college. The other one was also, you fit the description of someone whose car keys just got stolen. Yeah, I bet I fit a description. And I knew that I hadn't done anything. So it's not a nice experience. But coming back to Sitting in Limbo as well, I mean, the storytelling was fantastic. And the way they got the emotion over, especially the part where Anthony hears the door knocking, or he thought he heard the door knocking, and that flashback scene was really powerful, because imagine every knock you hear on your door gives you a flashback to being dragged out of your house like a criminal. That scene was so powerful, because at the end of the day, it was like you could see the fear in his eyes and the cold sweat that he woke up in. And it took his wife to come down and be like, no, it's okay. And you could see, like, PTSD is usually only taken seriously or like thought of in terms of war veterans. But it happens to regular civilians. It happens to regular people. Like post-traumatic stress disorder. It's any sort of traumatic experience. And I think that's one of the main things that Sitting in Limbo kind of helped to kind of get across as well, with that scene where Anthony's like out in the street looking to see if he's going to get taken away again. So it's one of them it was such a powerful scene. And I mean, even looking at the way he got taken away, it was one of them where he was like, what's happening? I've been here for years. I've not done anything wrong. and the way he was being talked to, and when his when his partner, when she was trying to get some sort of clarity as to what was happening, and the way she was being talked to. I mean, that's a traumatic experience for anybody, let alone someone of advanced age. So it's one of them where it's just, yeah. I mean, coming back to the language thing. I mean, language like alleged children and a man claim is your headmaster. I mean, that was a piss take. I mean, that kind of verbiage and that kind of treatment really eats at your pride, especially when you're honest and hardworking and you've busted your ass for the same country that's now trying to kick you out and send you a country that you were invited to, that you were part of a generation of people who were invited, and now they're trying to kick you out with this hostile environment thing. I mean, the second time Anthony got detained, you could see before it, like you could see the build up of fear and frustration, and a lot of times not knowing what's going to happen next can drive someone crazy. I mean, imagine this has happened to people whose parents and grandparents were invited here, and then you start to at least scratch the surface in terms of the depth of this issue, where it's like the fear. I mean, Sitting in Limbo is the perfect title, because at the end of the day, if you're in a detention center, you can't call home, you can't do anything. It's like they take your belongings from you. It's like you may as well be in prison or an internment camp, because you don't know, and that not knowing can be the hardest thing. I mean, fast forwarding a little, when you could see when you saw the news that Anthony received about he was going to be deported, you could see it crushed him, and it crushed his family as well. And the sad thing is, this isn't even an isolated story. That's the worst thing. I mean, Sitting in Limbo for me personally didn't tell me anything that I didn't already know, because me and my partner have been following these stories. But for some people who didn't know and hadn't been following these stories, because the Windrush Scandal was not well publicized. It really wasn't well publicized. So it's one of them where it's like a lot of it was swept under the rug, and people didn't know. So I think Sitting in Limbo was crucial in terms of giving a face and giving a voice and giving an image to a scandal that was an utter disgrace, yet another national disgrace that this country should be embarrassed and ashamed of itself for. I mean, that said, this isn't even an isolated story. The Anthony Bryan story, obviously names changed to protect the innocent, but it's one of them. It's not even an isolated story, and it actually, for me, it banked on poor families not being able to fight it. Because I'll go through some facts and stats that popped up at the end of the show in a bit, but it's one of them where, like, the Home Office, when it was said at the end, the Home Office were playing fast and loose with their definition of immigration. Yeah, they're still doing that now. They're still doing that, playing fast and loose. I mean, the definition of immigration. It's one of them where it's like people. I said, a generation of people who were invited over here. Now you're trying to kick them out. They didn't come here illegally. They were invited here. They were transported here officially. So, I mean, the part about the judge criticizing the Home Office, I actually thought was very interesting, because I did think to myself, it's all good one judge criticizing, but the problem is an entire system filled with prejudice that needs to be changed. So right now, as I'm recording this, for the past 2 weeks since George Floyd, may he rest in peace, since George Floyd's murder, it's one of them where the fact where people have finally woken up and seen that it's an institutionally racist system. It's an institutionally biased system. And that's what needs to be changed. It's a prejudiced system that needs to be changed. You can't, like, get one or two people out of it and expect something to change. No, it has to be an overhaul of the system. And coming back to Sitting in Limbo, I mean, his son and daughter asking Anthony to speak to a Guardian journalist was interesting. I mean, even though it was the Guardian, and I have no real issue with the Guardian, they're as close to kind of balanced journalism as you're going to get, in my opinion. I was still saying to my partner whilst we were watching this, he still needs to watch what he says, as it still can be twisted. I mean, even if the Guardian ain't twisting his words, there are other so-called legitimate news media sources who will take what someone like Anthony says in his story, twist it, manipulate it, and whip up even more racial hatred. I mean, Piers Morgan, speaking of whipping up hatred, I mean, Piers Morgan annoys me to no end, coming off as a social justice warrior when he's an utter tool. And for me, he shoots his mouth off just for ratings. To me, he does not believe what he's saying. He just shoots his mouth off because for me, the guy is just an utter cretin. I mean, he's crass. He's a bully. He's a xenophobe. So it's one of them where him coming off as a social justice warrior, doesn't sit well with me. But it was, but in Sitting in Limbo, it was fantastic to see Doreen Lawrence getting a shout out in the program as well, because Baroness Lawrence, she has obviously fought for racial equality after what happened to her son Stephen, tragically, and it's a case of the injustices that still run rife even since that happened. It's still there. I mean, again, coming back to Sitting in Limbo, it's a case of, imagine the Windrush generation to have your identity boiled down to whether or not you have a passport or not. That must be so demoralizing and dehumanizing. And I think that was another part of the story with the emotion that they got over in that drama. I think that was another important part as well. Because if you've been through the dirt and fought to stay in a country that not only you had to fight to prove you belong in, but a country that is home and is now trying to kick you out when you were invited. Again, that's the important thing. Invited. That's gotta be utterly demoralizing to have that same country boil your identity, who you are, down to whether or not you have a British passport. And at least Anthony got his in the end. But there are a lot of cases where people haven't got theirs. But it's one of them where, Sitting in Limbo, I love the pacing of the program. I mean, it took a nice methodical pace over the 90 minutes, which I actually enjoyed because I think that helped get the emotion over. And at no point did it ever become boring. Because I said the story was set up well, the pacing, the narrative, it was just very, very well done. And Patrick Robinson as Anthony and Nadine Marshall as his partner, brilliantly casted. I really, really enjoyed their performances. And I mean, this could easily have been a series with intertwining stories, because there are so many stories like Anthony's out there. And I said I'm going to get into some of the facts and stats from the end of the program in a minute. But there are so many stories out there that were similar, and are similar, that you could easily make a series, because it happened literally up and down the country, and different people had different experiences. And some people, I mean, obviously some people had it a lot more hostile than Anthony did. But imagine a mention of the phrase hostile environment leading to an actual hostile environment. I mean, Theresa May, even when Theresa May tried to apologize for the Windrush scandal, and I say apologize in inverted commas, to me, she looked like she was trying to force herself to cry, but holding in a turd at the same time. You know, one of them ones where someone's apologizing through gritted teeth. That's what it came across to me like when Theresa May was trying to apologize. And it's like, trying to force emotion. It's like for trying to force blood out of a stone. But I mean, the facts at the end of the program really help put some of the struggles of those who suffered in the Windrush scandal into context. I mean, the fact that it took 8 years and it was only admitted in April 2010 that in 2010, the landing costs for thousands of those invited over to Britain, by the way, on the Empire Windrush were destroyed by the Home Office. Then later the same year, they admitted they wrongly detained at least 850 people between 2012 and 2017. God, that should be the most damning evidence of how much of an utter disgrace the Windrush scandal is. And for people like Boris Johnson saying that this country is no longer, it's not racist, it clearly is. And as said, that's from the Home Office, who were responsible for monitoring immigration. So if there's this much apathy, like destroying landing cards for those who were invited to this country, and then wrongly detaining 850 people in 5 years, it beggars belief. There should be no trust for the Home Office at all. But I mean, 83 members of the Windrush generation being deported even though they had the right to live here. That was heartbreaking as a stat. Imagine one of them ones where you have the right to live here and you've still been deported through voluntary repatriation or not. With voluntary repatriation, that's a case of you could see the fear tactics employed on Anthony. Where it's like, oh, you might as well just take a couple grand. Yeah, just take a couple grand and go back. Because even at one point he was considering that. Like he was considering, you know what? Let me just spare the family. Let me just spare the family all the trouble, all the headache. I don't want to be a burden. I'm just gonna take it and go. Even though he had the right to live here. And a lot of families dealing with that. That's so much pressure. Because you remember, like whilst you're under this thing, remember you can't work. You can't claim benefits either. So you literally are sitting in limbo. And you don't know whether you're going to be able to work and or claim benefits again. So unless you've got some savings, how are you going to survive? Because you're seen as illegally being in this country. So it's one of them where it's like, I mean, 83 members of the Windrush generation being deported, even though they had the right to live here. That is disgraceful. The disgraceful failings of the Home Office were exposed. And also, it's like 13 of those people passed away before they even acknowledged the so-called mistake, in inverted commas. And that was only in 2019 that they acknowledged that mistake. So look at how late that is. And that it's one of them. It's like 13 of those people they passed away. They were deported even though they had a right to live here. Even though they had a right to live here, they were deported. 83 of them, and 13 of them passed away before that utter disgrace of a Home Office even admitted that a mistake had been made. That should, oh my God, it's infuriating. I mean, even as recently as May 2020, the Home Office revealed that out of 1,275 applicants to the Windrush compensation scheme, 1,275 applicants, only 60 got any sort of compensation. There are failings everywhere here. It's just like this Conservative government and the handling of the coronavirus COVID-19 thing, pandemic. Failings everywhere, and disgraceful failings at that. I mean, even the real version of Anthony from the drama only got compensation for wrongful detention. Only compensation for wrongful detention, and that was it. utterly disgraceful. And it's one of them where it's like, and people wonder why us as black people are protesting at the moment with the whole BLM, Black Lives Matter movement. Because I look at it as this kind of injustice that was shown on Sitting in Limbo, this kind of injustice that has been shown that has been shown with guys like Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Stephen Lawrence, Mark Duggan, Smiley Culture. It's one of them ones where you look at, and the list of names goes on, and it's one of them where you look at that kind of thing, and it's a case of, you wonder why this is all coming to a head now. So it's one of them where it's just, I thought Sitting in Limbo was absolutely fantastic. I thought it was very, very good. It got the emotion of the issue over, and I think they did a great job of getting that emotion over. And at the end of the day, it is one of them ones where you look at, I said, the pacing, the story that was told, the way it was told. It wasn't rushed. To me, it didn't feel rushed. The way they told the story, they took the time to get the emotion over. And in storytelling, it is very important that you establish your characters, establish your narrative, and follow it through until the end. And gladly, there was a happy ending. I mean, I said this was the pre-Watershed version, but I said, Sitting in Limbo, easy 5 stars, 10 out of 10, however you want to grade it. It is definitely worth a watch. If you don't know what happened during the Windrush Scandal, or even if you do, I think it is worth a watch, because, as I said, the story is told so well. It is told so well. But it is one of them ones where, as I said, these are not isolated cases. I would say watch this drama, Sitting in Limbo, about the Windrush Scandal on BBC iPlayer, and do some research and dig into how institutionally corrupt, racist, prejudiced, biased that the scandal was, and you will start to see how institutionally and systematically racist, biased, prejudiced, corrupt this system that we all live in and suffer for is. My name is Straight Shootin LJA, and you know what? I'd like to thank you for your time. Thank you very much, everyone. Remember, at SSLJA on Twitter, facebook.com/Straight Shootin, no G at the end of shooting, LJA, Straight Shootin LJA. You know what? I've been Straight Shootin LJA. Thank you for your time. Comment section is below, and check out the rest of the Straight Shootin reviews and rants on youtube.com/LJA Productions 07, and also mixcloud.com/Straight Shootin LJA.